वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की fateh. I'd like to thank all the attendees for joining today's webinar hosted by Sikh Research Institute. My name is Gurdev Singh Beer and I will be the host for today's session. The presentation will begin shortly. Before we get started, I wanted to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's web event. I will then provide some information about the Sikh Research Institute and Santbir Singh, our presenter, before turning it over for the main presentation. You're looking at the example of the GoToWebinar attendee interface, and it is made up of two parts: the viewer window on the left, which allows you to see everything the presenters will share on their screen, and the control panel at the right. It is made up of the two parts. As you can see, you can use the orange arrow to open and control and close the control panel. The audio pane provides audio information. By default, you have joined the webinar via mic and speakers. If you prefer, you can join the audio via telephone by using the Use Telephone. And the dial-in information will be displayed, including an audio pin. Questions during the webinar should be directed to the moderator, who is Harpreet Singh Sangha. You can send your questions either by typing it in your attendee panel, or you may ask it over the mic. And in the questions panel, you can request to unmute the mic. Please keep the questions short and relevant to the topic being presented. In case you don't have a mic, please state your name, city, and question in the questions panel. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and everyone will receive an email within 7 days with a link to view a recording of today's event. If for any reason you experience any technical difficulties during the session and you can't see the main presentation, for example, then please do not hesitate to contact me via the chat panel. If you lose your internet connection or have to restart your computer during the session, then you can rejoin the session by clicking on the URL that is included in your original registration confirmation email. Finally, at the end of this presentation, I will launch a testimonial and feedback window. We'd appreciate it if you could take a few moments to provide your feedback and comments on how this session went and how we can improve future sessions. Now I'll provide some background to the Institute and also Santbir Singh. The mission of the Sikh Research Institute is to provide educational resources to Sikhs to lead a Guru-inspired life. Sikh Re is an inclusive resource for you, your family, your community, and 25 million Sikhs worldwide for educational programming, strategic solutions, and Gurmukhi content. And now I'd like to take a minute to introduce our presenter and also talk to you about SIDDIQ, which is Sikh Re's flagship leadership development program that is offered annually. But first, a little bit about our presenter, Santbir Singh. Santbir lives in Toronto with his wife and 2 children. He has spoken at retreats, conferences, and youth camps for more than 15 years. He is an avid student of Sikh history, focusing on Sikh inspirations for social activism, human rights, and gender equality, as well as trying to reach a more critical analysis of Sikh history from a wide variety of different schools of thought and resources. SIDDIQ. Before we start, I'd like to invite you all to join Sikh Re this summer in San Antonio, Texas from July 28th through August the 10th for an intensive immersion in Sikh culture, language, values and community through heightened understanding of Bani, Dwarik and Rehat. When you register for Siddiq, you can select a focus for your classroom session from one of three tracks: Sikhi 101, Sikhi 201, and Gurmukhi 101. You spend half your days in specialized classroom sessions with others who have chosen the same track. Later in the afternoon, the group comes together for Sikhi leadership development workshops, presentations and activities. Siddiq also features special nights set aside for talent shows, ultimate frisbee, a trip into downtown San Antonio, nature walks and other activities to provide bonding and inspiration. Every year we hear back from Siddiq alumni about how valuable the bonds they've formed at Siddiq have been in terms of friendships, networking and continued academic and spiritual development. Please visit the website www.sikhre.org for more details. We are currently accepting applications for all tracks, but don't delay, especially if you're planning on traveling from outside the US or Canada, as the visa process can take several months. You can also like us on Facebook too and follow us on Twitter to get news like upcoming Siddiq announcements, videos, and to stay informed of new resources in general, like this live webinar you're about to attend, which Sikri is putting out for learners everywhere. Now I'd like to pass it over to Santbir Singh to begin today's presentation. And just give me a moment while I transfer the presenter rights to Santbir Singh ji. Okay, Santbir Singh ji, you should be good to go.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I hope everyone can see my screen, and it is the beginning of the presentation. Today we will be talking about the feminine voice in the Khalsa Panth. The talk, this live webinar, is called Adding Patase, Hearing the Feminine in the Khalsa Panth. For those of you who don't know, Patase is a type of sugar that is made in Punjab traditionally, and it is what Mata Jeet Kaur added to the Amrit as Guru Gobind Singh Ji was preparing it in 1699. And so during this month of Vaisakhi, where we celebrate the revelation of the Khalsa, we thought here at the Sikh Research Institute that it would be appropriate to look at a different perspective on the Khalsa Panth today, in the past, and through the lens of Guru Granth Sahib Ji and Bani. As we begin the talk, I wanted to address a couple of issues. The first issue is, of course, I am a man and I'm presenting a workshop on the feminine perspective in Sikhi. This may seem a little strange, but I think it's also appropriate because we have to stop thinking about the issue of men and women as separate within the Panth, but also look at when we discriminate or when we judge or when we devalue certain members of our community, that has an impact not just on those people who are being devalued, but also on the entire nation. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be looking at not just what the impact has been for Sikh women with how Sikhi is practiced today or how we teach Sikhi, but also what the impact is on Sikh men. What have we lost as Sikh men with the current way that we are looking at Sikhi today? I also wanted to comment before we go on about some of the images in the presentation. We will be using images sometimes of the Gurus as well. We need to remember that Bhai Gurdas Ji tells us that Gur Murat Gur Shabad Hai, so that the true image of the Guru is actually the Guru's word. Sometimes for a presentation like this we need to use an image though, just for the visual need of PowerPoint presentation. but we need to keep in mind that these are just artistic representations of what people thought the Guru Sahibs may have looked like, and are never accurate either. If they're from the 18th century or from today, they are not contemporary portraits, of course. So to begin with, and for those of you also, I just wanted to mention that please feel free to type in questions if you have questions, and if it's appropriate or if we have time, we will answer the questions during the presentation, and if not, we will try to get to the questions at the end. But this can be an interactive session, as difficult as that may be when we are talking over the internet and I can't see you and you can't see me. Hopefully we can make this as interactive and engaging as possible for all of us. So let's take a look at this presentation. First of all, I want us all to close our eyes for a second and imagine a Khalsa. So when we hear the word Khalsa, what do we think of? What are the first images that come to our mind? And I think that many of us will imagine figures like this. And so these guys, I'm sure some of you have seen the YouTube video of these fellows who, you know, they were eating fluorescent lights and driving over themselves with jeeps and trucks. It's pretty ridiculous to see, but it's somewhat of an accurate representation of what we imagine, many of us in the community today, or even outside the community, when we think of the word Khalsa. Khalsa has become a very macho word. It's become an aggressive word almost. It's become a way of showing strength in this very male-dominated way, a traditionally male-dominated way. And so when we think of Khalsa many times today, we think of people who are maybe physically strong or reckless, or warriors in a very physical sense without maybe that spiritual or other component. But is this what the Khalsa really means, and is this what Guru Gobind Singh Ji intended for the Khalsa to represent? What I want to do today is challenge some of our notions about what it means to be a Khalsa. That doesn't mean that we won't be exploring also the warrior tradition. In fact, just yesterday I was really honored to present a talk on Holla Mahalla, which is of course a celebration of the Sikh warrior. And so the warrior tradition is integral to Sikhi as well, but it is not all that makes a Sikh. We have to ask ourselves, who do we model ourselves when we think of ourselves as Khalsa? Who are our heroes? Who are the Sikhs that we have put up posters of in our rooms, whose images are used as our Facebook profile pictures, or as icons or our desktops? A lot of times for Sikhs today, we use images of Sikh men, and when we do use images of Sikh men, we use images that are very macho or very aggressive in a sense. So here we have a contemporary portrait of what somebody imagines Baba Deep Singh looking like. He's filled with rage and he's about to cut off the head of this Afghani soldier. And so this is how we have visualized Baba Deep Singh in the modern imagination, even though this is not only disrespectful to Baba Deep Singh, but it's creating a skewed vision of Sikh history. So what type of figure was Baba Deep Singh actually? Well, if we look at Sikh history, Baba Deep Singh was in fact, became a Sikh of Guru Gobind Singh Ji at the age of 13 or 14 years old, and he became a Sikh by first performing Kirtan at Anandpur Sahib with his mother. He spent most of his life engaged in teaching children and teaching others how to read Bani, and also creating manuscripts, copies of Guru Granth Sahib Ji and other scriptures. So we have a very skewed vision of Baba Deep Singh today, and in addition, when we imagine a Sikh warrior, we can see the image here, it's somewhat filled with rage and anger. Whereas Bani tells us that a true warrior is someone who keeps their emotions in control and who is able to fully experience the love of Vaheguru even in that moment of the battle. And so this is integral to understanding Sikhi and maybe something that we have forgotten today. So let's take a look at first our Sikh history. What we don't realize, a lot of us unfortunately, is that Sikh history today, we have lost a lot of it. And so when we think about Sikh heroes from the past, we're really thinking about characters like Baba Deep Singh or Bhai Mani Singh, and not Sikh women many times because we don't have their voices. We have lost those stories. And why have we lost so much of our history? Well, because the 18th century was a really horrific time for Sikhs. The scale of the massacres that we endured, the level of genocide that was inflicted upon the Sikh nation is really difficult for us to imagine today, especially in the diaspora, for those of us who are listening in the diaspora and have freedom of movement and freedom of thought and freedom of choice in terms of the religion that we choose. In the 1700s, Sikhs were literally treated like animals. They were on the run, living in jungles, and here we have an image, of course, of the famous incident where Sikh women were kept in jail with their babies cut up piece by piece and strung around their necks. Just the thought of that is so horrifying to those of us who are parents. It's really unimaginable. There was a time when Mir Mannu, the man who persecuted the Sikh women in this incident that we're looking at here, this painting of that historical episode, where he had destroyed so many copies of Guru Granth Sahib Ji and Sikh history books that it is said in Sikh history that the canals and rivers of Punjab became choked, that many manuscripts were lost to Sikh history. At the same time, our institutions, our gurdwaras, our schools, were being controlled by non-Sikhs, who at the beginning of these persecutions were very much helping the community, trying to preserve our traditions while we were unable to take care of our own institutions because we were being persecuted. But over time, those groups became very nepotistic and corrupt. And by the 1800s and the 1900s, they had totally lost and fallen away from core Sikh traditions. So what this means is that through the 1700s, we had two processes going on. One, we lost a lot of our oral history because so many Sikhs were being killed. In the Bandha half the Panth was destroyed. We lost many of our scriptures and traditions and manuscripts. And moreover, the manuscripts and traditions we did have were being taken care of, were being looked after by non-Sikhs, who many times had views that were contrary to Gurmat. Either they were sexist because they were from a Hindu tradition, or they may have been casteist because of that same tradition. And so many voices were lost in Sikh history. And today, what I want to begin with for the first section of this webinar is let us look today at some lost stories from Sikh history. And then we will go on to explore Bani. But I thought it might be a good way to focus ourselves for this talk to look at those women from Sikh history whose stories we have forgotten or who we don't remember as much in our popular imagination. And that's very important because Guru Granth Sahib Ji is not a history book. Guru Granth Sahib Ji is very much a scripture that is based on a human being's interaction with the divine. And there's very little or no history in Guru Granth Sahib Ji at all. At the same time, for the Sikh history and Sikh tradition is usually kept in the oral tradition. And the problem is that much of our oral tradition today is male-dominated. So I want to try to remedy that a little bit by looking at some Sikh women that we may have forgotten about. When Guru Amar Das Ji became Guru, he really started to centralize and organize the Khalsa Panth, the Sikh nation, the Sikh Panth. And one of the things that he did was he created 22 manjis. And these 22 manjis acted on behalf of the Guru. And they would go out, these manjidars, and they would go out and act on behalf of the Guru and be in charge, in an administrative sense, of local sangats all around South Asia. And when we talk about South Asia, we're talking about from Afghanistan all the way to what would be the borders of Bhutan or even Burma today, going down to Sri Lanka and up into the Nepal and Tibet area. And so Guru Amar Das Ji created this system whereby, because of the lack of modern communication, if a Sangat wanted to interact or communicate with the Guru while he was at Govindwal Sahib, they would interact through this Manjidar. And the Manjidar had a very important role. What they would do, they would be in charge of doing katha, preaching, teaching Sikhi. They would be in charge of reading letters from Guru Amar Das Ji, teaching Sikhi and explaining Sikhi, and also providing communication about upcoming events and so forth, where Guruji requested the Panth to come back to Govindwal Sahib for a meeting, for example. In addition, these representatives were in charge of the Sangat's finances. So they collected all the revenue. They sent some revenue back to Gobindwal Sahib for Bantuk projects. At the same time, they used the rest to administer the gurdwaras, or the dharmsalas as they were called then, for the benefit of the community. And thirdly, what these manjidars did, and this is really integral, is that they were the way that you became a Sikh in that time period. So this is before, of course, Khandeli Bol, before Amrit, as we understand it today. So if you wanted to become a Sikh, there was an initiation ceremony, and it wasn't practical for people to travel all the way to Gurdwara. This could be a months-long journey. So if you wanted to become a Sikh, you couldn't travel all the way to where the Guru was staying, wherever that, if it's Guru Ramdas, you'd go to Amritsar. If it's Guru Hara, you'd go to Kiratpur, for example. Guru Amardas, you go to Gobindwal, but you couldn't travel there if you're living, hundreds of or even 1,000 kilometers away. Now, Guru Amardas, some of the people that he appointed as manjidars were women, and this is really just amazing to us, considering the role that women play in the modern Sikh Panth. So women were in charge of these communities, and when I say in charge, I mean they acted on behalf of the Guru, which is really just incredible. We're talking about if you wanted to become a Sikh, you had to become a Sikh through a woman. If you want to interact with the Guru, you had to interact through this manji system, which was a woman. And one of the manjidars was a woman. She was appointed for Kabul, Afghanistan. So we all know Afghanistan today. I can tell you that Afghanistan 400 years ago was not a much more friendly place than it is today to women. And so even in this image of 16th century Kabul, you can see, or I think it's 17th century Kabul, you can see in the background a woman in a burqa. So this was not a space where women were able to interact openly in a lot of cases. But Guru Amardas Ji very consciously chose a woman to represent the Sikh Panth in this very male-dominated space in a Muslim country where women were traditionally kept away from public roles. A really revolutionary practice. Now, on the other hand, it speaks very ill of Sikh history, unfortunately, that we don't even know the name of this woman. So she's either called Mai Kabuli, because the mother from Kabul, or Mai Seva, the woman who did Seva. We've forgotten her name. We've forgotten all biographical details about her completely. We have no information about her besides the fact that she was in charge of this Sangat for many years. And that her name, and she was popularly known as either Mai Kabuli or Mai Seva. A lot of us know the stories of Sikh women like Bibi Pani or Bibi Nanaki or Mata Gujari, and I want to try to stay away from those stories as much as possible today because I want to explore different avenues. Those women were very important to the Sikh nation, and we'll be touching on them later, but I also want to talk about those stories that we've forgotten, and one of those is Bibi Sarup Kaur. Sarup Kaur is the first woman in Sikh history to be given the title of Kaur, and really where the tradition started. And the title of Kaur actually comes before Guru Gobind Singh Ji created the Khalsa in 1699, which is pretty incredible. Sarup Kaur is actually the daughter of Guru Har Rai Sahib. Guru Har Rai Sahib had two children. His older son was Ram Rai. Many of you may know the story of how Ram Rai changed the line of Guru Granth Sahib Ji to appease the Mughal emperor, and he was kicked out of the Sikh nation for that terrible act. And Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji's younger son, of course, was Guru Harkishan Sahib Ji. Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji had two boys, but he actually also had a daughter, and Bibi Sarup Kaur was his daughter, but it was not his and Mata Salakni's biological daughter. They actually adopted her. So adoption in Punjab is still pretty rare. For those of us who are from a Punjabi background, usually adoptions happen within families in Punjabi culture. Bibi Sarup Kaur was not from the family, and moreover, she was a girl that was being adopted, which is really remarkable as well, from even from a Punjabi cultural point of view, to adopt a woman where women are usually devalued. And so Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji adopted Bibi Sarup Kaur, gave her the title of Kaur, and not only that, he educated her. And Sikh history tells us that she was a scholar, and she is considered to be one of the first scholars of Sikh history after Bhai Gurdas Ji, and she wrote history books on the Gurus. And that's all we know about her, unfortunately. We don't know much else about her. So Bibi Sarup Kaur wrote history books. We don't have her history books anymore, which again speaks to how much of Sikh history we've lost. But it's really important to remember that there are a lot of Sikh voices, Sikh women voices, that even if we don't know about, did exist. That can be heartbreaking, but it can also be inspiring. to remember that what we view in our history isn't the full picture. For example, the image here, by the way, I've used an image of Kirtpur Sahib, which is where Bibi Sirop Kaur would have lived with her father, Guru Har Sahib Ji. This is a contemporary comic made by a Sikh in Seattle. He was inspired to make comics about Sikh women because he has a young daughter, and he wanted to show her inspiring stories. So this picture may not be totally accurate, but that's okay. I think it's a spirit that counts, and I wasn't able to find any other images, unfortunately, of Shaheed Bibi Daler Kaur. Some of you may have know Bibi Daler Kaur now. Her story's starting to become a little bit more popular. Bibi Daler Kaur was in charge of a group of about 100 Sikh men and women. When Guru Gobind Singh Ji and the Khalsa Panth abandoned Anandpur Sahib in 1703, after the Mughal emperor and the Hindu hill rajas made a promise not to attack, a small group of soldiers stayed behind out of the principle that we would not give up our institutions, and even if we're leaving, we need to keep at least a small force there to ensure that they are not disrespected or destroyed. One of the most shameful episodes of Sikh history, in my opinion, is partition. Partition is really shameful because it's one of the few times in Sikh history where Sikhs actually persecuted other groups. And while we were also being killed in horrible ways, we cannot deny the fact that we also killed a lot of innocent Muslims as a community. In addition, one of the most horrific parts of partition was the forced killing or suicides, I don't know if you can call them suicides, of Sikh women, where Sikh women were forced to jump into wells, for example, to save their honor. These were honor killings, essentially, so that they would not be raped by Muslims in the tumultuous times of partition. And I want us to think about the idea of honor, and let's imagine Bibi Daler Kaur. Bibi Daler Kaur volunteered to stay behind at Anandpur Sahib and defend the institutions there. There was a high likelihood that she would be captured and that she could be sexually assaulted. There was a high likelihood that she would be tortured. And yet, for her, it wasn't an issue that she would be dishonored in that sense. That use of the word honor wasn't even prevalent in Sikhi parlance. Honor, ijat, is actually something that you get from your guru, and it cannot be taken away through physical assault. It's a mindset. And so Guru Gobind Singh Ji was not worried about Bibi Daler Kaur being assaulted and the Sikh Panth losing its honor, and neither was Bibi Daler Kaur. Guruji gave her blessing and commended her for the bravery of volunteering and staying there. And her and all of those 100 Sikhs that she was in charge of were shaheed and killed, protecting Anandpur Sahib. A really inspiring story. You know, if we look at how we understand Sikh women and we look at Sikh warriors, we tend to create this really macho idea of what a Sikh woman looks like. I'm not saying that Sikh women need to be decked out in jewelry or anything like that, but what I'm saying is that there are many different roles or ways that a woman can, and it should be up to women, how they choose to present themselves in terms of their femininity, whether they choose to wear jewelry or not, whether they choose to dress in a certain way or not. That should be up to Sikh women and not something that should be imposed. And I want to look at this image here, which is an image of an 18th century Sikh warrior painted contemporarily, and she's a Sikh woman. She's wearing a suit, you can see, and she's all dressed up. And so Sikh women were able to take on the role of being warriors in the early Sikh community while also not giving up their role as women. They didn't have to take on or mimic Sikh men in order to be warriors. And that's really something that we need to move away from in contemporary Sikh culture. We have historical evidence that there were Sikh women, some who dressed in chole and damalle, and some who dressed in suits when they fought in war. And both were equally appropriate. And it was a matter of personal choice. And that's what we need to come back to, giving women that choice of how to express themselves. When we move to the contemporary time period, even in the last 100 years, we've forgotten a lot about the role the Sikh women have played. And here I have some images of Shahidi Jathas. These were Jathas that would come, and you can see the picture on the right. They are in front of Akal Takht Sahib, where Jathas would come and do Ardas at Akal Takht before they would go and get arrested, fighting for independence or the Gurdwara reform movement. These images are from the 30s and 40s. And there were Jathas made completely of women. where they would go out and get arrested by the British colonial authorities and suffer hardship in jail. And many times they would even go with their children. And one of the most inspiring stories is Bibi Bilbirkor, who as a 22-year-old young woman holding her 2-year-old baby marched out at Jeto Morcha and refused to go to the back of the Morcha, even though the Sikh men around her urged her to, because as a woman they said, it's we don't want you to get hurt. The British colonial authorities are shooting at us. There's a high probability that many of us will be killed today. And these were during the peaceful protests of the 20s. And Bibi Bilbirkor refused. And she told her brothers, she told those Gursikhs then, she said, I also took Amrit from Guru Gobind Singh Ji. I also have a role to play in this band. And I can think of nothing greater than to give my life in the service of the band. And when the Jathadar of the Jatha said to her, but you're carrying a baby with you, she said, this baby of mine is a gift from Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And I can think of nothing greater for this child but to be here in service of the Khalsa Band. It's such an inspiring story. And Bibi Bilbirkor, as she marched, singing Vaheguru, 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 the British colonial authorities shot at her. And the first bullet pierced her son's head and went into her chest. And the baby died. Bibi Bilbirkor simply laid her beloved son on the ground on the side of the road and continued to march. The second shot hit her in her forehead and blood started to come into her eyes. And she still kept marching, and finally the third shot killed her. An incredibly inspiring story, and it shows how we've lost a lot of our history, but not only that, Sikh women at times of movements have always played a primary role, not a secondary role, not a supportive role, but they were out there on the forefront. And this is also true of contemporary time periods. So in 1984, when Baba Jarnail Singh first came into Bantik prominence in 1977, the first people that really supported him were women, because culturally, socially in Punjab, there was a lot of problems. There was a beginning, because of the Green Revolution, there had been a lot of social unrest in Punjab, and there was issues around violence, domestic violence, alcohol abuse, all the same problems we're seeing in Punjab today started to first arise in the 1970s, and it was women in villages in Punjab who were the early supporters of Baba Jarnail Singh. And here we can see an image of women doing kirtan, and I believe this is an image of women doing kirtan in Darbar Sahib. It may be at Akal Takht though. And these women are doing kirtan, and they're part of a Shahidi Jatha that is going to give a rest in 1983, just before the attack. Women were actually killed in the attack, not just the innocent pilgrims that were there, but there were 2 women who were actually fighters as well who died in the 84 attack fighting against the Indian state. So women have played a primary role, but also when we look at Sikh history, unfortunately, as in any conflicts, women also bear the brunt of violence against the community. And that was especially true in the 1980s and early 90s, where women were really targeted with systematic rape, dehumanization, to try to break the community and break the spirit of the community, and to try to traumatize the community. And this began, of course, in November '84 and continued. And so here we have 2 images of women from '84, from November of '84, and we can only imagine what they've endured. I don't think we need to go into the details. We all, most of us know, and we can find the information online if we don't. But really, it was women who took the brunt of the government's campaign of trying to eradicate the Sikh political voice. I want to now take a look at the Guru time period and what the Gurus actually taught us. One of the main focuses of Sikhi is to destroy social and cultural norms, if we really think about Sikhi. What Guru Nanak Sahib Ji created was a revolution in thought and mind, where a human being is connected to the divine internally and externally sees the divine in everyone around them. This is a really amazing way of looking at the world and very unique. What Guru Nanak Sahib Ji wished to create was a society where everyone treated each other with love, because they recognized Vaheguru Akal Purkh in everyone that they saw, in everyone that they interacted with. And so once you see Vaheguru in everyone, then it doesn't matter if the person is Muslim or Hindu. It doesn't matter if the person is a male or a woman. It doesn't matter if the person is straight or gay. It doesn't matter if the person is black or of European descent. What matters is their actions and behavior, whether you can learn from them or not, whether they are good sangat or bad sangat in terms of how they impact your behavior. That's what becomes the deciding characteristic, not what they look like, not how rich they are, and so forth. And we all know this, but yet we talk about it a lot. How much are we practicing it? But really the primary focus of Guru Nanak's social vision was to destroy the prior social norms. And the Langar institution was really at its heart about that. It was a really dramatic way, and we don't understand, a lot of us, how strict eating rules were in India at the time of Guru Nanak Sahib Ji, how much people were separated. Eating is such an intimate thing. Eating is how we share with each other, how we interact, how we, when we go out with friends, we go to have dinner with each other, we invite people over to our house, we have parties where we have dinner parties and so forth. Like, eating is really where friendships are made, where people communicate with each other, where people learn from each other. And it was through Langar that Guru Nanak Sahib Ji really spread Sikhi. It was really this amazing institution. Here I used an image of a contemporary painting of Mata Kivi, who is one of the few women, one of the few Sikhs whose name is included in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, which is really incredible. And she's mentioned in the Vad of Satan Balwand. When they talk about Guru Angad Sahib Ji, they talk about Mata Kivi and how amazing she is. And she was in charge of this huge langar, this huge organizational task. She was in charge of it at Khadur Sahib during Guru Angad Sahib Ji's time. She was Guru Angad Sahib Ji's wife. Now, when Guru Nanak Sahib Ji left the river at Sultanpur and he came out and he really started to preach Sikhi for the first time, many of us, of course, have heard the Sakhi since we were kids. What was his first lesson? His first lesson is Na koi Hindu, na hi Musalman. And what does that mean? Guru Nanak Sahib Ji is not saying that there's no Hindus or Muslims. Obviously there are. What he's saying is that I don't recognize that. I recognize only the Akal Roop in everyone. Only the formless and Nirankar that exists within everyone. I refuse to use cultural or religious or social constructs to define other people. I refuse to interact with other people based on what society tells me they are. I interact with people by what I know they are, which is an aspect of Vaheguru. And that's really the primary focus of Guru Nanak Sahib Ji's vision. Now, there's a strong legacy of reform in the Guru time period, and of course we talked about Guru Amar Das Ji earlier. Guru Amar Das Ji was a Manjis. Here we can see a contemporary painting. I'm not sure how accurate it is, because of course we don't have a lot of these people's names and we don't know what they look like. But anyways, it's a good image to get an idea of Guru Amar Das Ji with his 22 Manjidars who were in charge of the different communities of Sikhs around South Asia. And we can see women in there. And so while the community was not totally equal, just as our communities today aren't totally equal, even in a society like Canada or America or UK and so forth, they were revolutionarily different from the communities around them. Women were given positions of power. And so that's really essential, is that when we think of roles that are open to women, oftentimes they are very constrained roles. Whereas Guru Amar Das Ji and the Gurus wished to open up roles to women that were different. Women were leaders on the battlefield, like Bibi Daler Kaur. Women were leaders in an administrative sense. Women were leaders in a social sense. They had positions of leadership open to them. They were people that other Sikhs looked up to try to emulate of how to be a Sikh. And they played a very integral role in the early Sikh community. Here on the left we have a handkerchief kept at Gurdwara Tola Sahib, which it is said was sewn by Bibi Nanaki for her brother Guru Nanak before his first Udasi. And on the right we see an old portrait of Bibi Banni. Bibi Nanaki is the first Sikh. It's really an important fact to remember that the first person to recognize Guru Nanak as a guru was a woman. It was Bibi Nanaki. And she formed the nucleus of the very first Sikh Sangat at Sultanpur, her and her husband, by Jairam. And of course, Bibi Banni's role in early Sikh history, as well as the daughter of Guru Amar Das, wife of Guru Ram Das, and mother of Guru Arjan, is also very important. up until the British time period, the deed, the land deed, and you can find it in historical books. I wasn't able to find an image for this presentation online, but the land deed for Amritsar was made out to Bibi Bani's name. That the land of Amritsar was owned by Bibi Bani. And so Bibi Bani's and other Sikh women in the Guru's Darbar, their role was very important. Mata Gujri, who is the wife of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, Mata Ananti, who is the wife of who's the mother of Guru Harkrishan Sahib Ji, and Mata Damodri, the wife of Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji. All of these women had very important roles to play in Sikh history, and they were essentially, they acted like prime ministers of the Guru's Darbar. They played really important roles. But I didn't want to focus on them too much because, of course, we would also naturally assume that people who are close in terms of relationships to the Gurus would have been given some prominence within the early Sikh community. And that's why I wanted to start off with figures like Bibi Dalerkor and Maiseva from Kabul, because those were people who were not just important Sikhs because they were related to the Guru. Not that Bibi Bani is important just because she's related to the Guru, but that's how many of us understand her today, unfortunately. Now, we don't have too much time, and I wish I could go on and we could explore some of these topics, but I really want to spend some time on Bani. And a lot of us talk about the feminine voice in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and we understand this very well. It's become quite popular to talk about it. And that's the fact that a lot of Guru Granth Sahib Ji is written from a female perspective, so that the interaction of the soul with Vaheguru Kalpurk is the interaction between a woman and her lover. And there's a lot of romantic imagery used there. That's not the only voice that's used in Bani, of course. Many times Vaheguru is called Sajanmeet, the friend, or Vaheguru is called a father, or Vaheguru is called a mother. And so there are many different voices used in Bani in terms of the perspective that the Gurus or the Bhagats or the Bhats use when they talk about Vaheguru or the Guru. But one of the prominent ones is that female voice. But I want to, the focus of that aspect is not our focus today. I want to look at other issues. And I really want to talk about this Shabad, what we call the woman Shabad. And it's a Shabad that we sort of present to the world or present to ourselves to make ourselves feel good all the time. We say, hey, look at the Shabad. Guru Nanak Sahib Ji was for gender equality. Guru Nanak Sahib Ji believed in gender equality. Look how amazing Sikh he is. Well, at the same time, our community has horrible issues of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and all sorts of problems. You know, we sort of keep talking about equality, but we're not really demonstrating it or living it. But let's really take a look at the Shabad, because it's used so much. And what is the Shabad really about? And first of all, let's read the Shabad together. Panda Jamiye, Panda Nimiye, Panda Mangan Viyaho, Pandaho Hove Dosti, Pandaho Chale Raho. And so, you know, the rough translation is down there, but we can all read it, that it's really talking about how a man's interactions or the central role that a woman plays for a man. That a man is born from a woman, he marries a woman, all his future generations come from women. You know, Guru Nanak Sahib Ji says in another part of this slok, you know, when his wife dies, he becomes sad and he wants to find a new partner to make his life live. That really, women are central to men's lives in many ways. But what I want to ask ourselves is, are women just important due to the relationship to men? When we use the Shabad, we're really looking at, we're saying that women's importance, we say, you know, that Jit Jamme Rajan, Sokya Manda Akhi Jit Jamme Rajan, that how can you call them dirty because they give birth to kings? But are women only important because they give birth to kings? Here we have a king of an early Sikh king of the early 20th century, Bhupinder Singh, who wasn't the greatest figure in terms of Gurmat philosophy at all. So are women only important because they give birth to men like this? Now, I would think that maybe we're missing out on what Guru Nanak Sahib Ji is really trying to teach. And let's take a look at the next Shabad. We're not going to go through it too much, but I want to just briefly look at it. Pehla sacha aap hoye, sache betha aaye, sache agge rakhiyo na koi na pityo jaye. Sacha hoye ke jevya lagga parn slok, kahoti jai satya kis eho lagga dog. We look at the last line. Jit mukh naam na uchre bin nave ras khai nanak eve jani it mukh thukka pahe. So the next slok in this pori, and so this slok, the Pandit Jamia slok that we use a lot to just talk about women's role in the Sikh community, it actually is part of Asadivad. And if for those of us who don't know, Vars are poris, so they're stanzas with sloks, couplets added to them that sort of explain the pori. And so this is the next slok before the pori. And if we look, this slok is all about sucham. It's all about ideas of purity. And Guru Nanak says, your ideas of physical purity are garbage. There's no such thing as physical purity. Everything is polluted. Real purity is when you are connected with the divine internally. If your mouth is not, if you're not connected with the divine, if you're not speaking of the divine, if you're not interacting with the divine, if you don't have that culture of Nam within you, then you are yourself polluted. Regardless of how much you clean yourself, regardless of how many rules you keep about how you eat, you are polluted. How polluted are you? Well, Guru Nanak Sahib is a lot more straight up and a lot more harsh than many of us can be today. Guru Nanak Sahib says, Nanak eve janiye tit mukh thukka pai, that I would spit in the mouth of a person who does not remember Vaheguru. This is pretty harsh language. Guru Nanak Sahib is saying that he would spit in the mouth of a person who doesn't remember Vaheguru. So what is the Shabad really about? Let's take a look at the Pori, which is really where the meaning of the Shabad comes out. Sabko akhe apna jis nahi sochon kadiye kita apo apna ape hi lekha sandiye jarena nahi et jagata kayet garab handiye manda kise na akhiye par akhar eho bujhiye murkhe naal na lujiye murkhe naal na lujiye. Guru Nanak Sahib Ji, what the Shabad is really about, manda kise na akhiye. We need to get away from our ideas of purity and impurity. And so one of the ways and one of the reasons why women are really discriminated against, especially in South Asian cultures, is that women are considered to be ritually impure, especially due to menstruation or childbirth. That during those times, women are considered to be especially impure, and because women menstruate or because they give birth, they are considered ritually impure and they're not allowed to perform certain religious tasks, both in Islam and in the Hindu traditions. And so Guru Nanak Sahib Ji, when he's talking about the Shabad is not about gender equality. The Shabad is about ideas of purity. And Guru Nanak Sahib Ji is saying that stop thinking about women as being impure. Really, he's saying, don't be stupid. He's talking to men. He's saying, you're ridiculous. Your whole life is centered around women. You love women, you're born from women, you marry women, and yet you call women impure. What does that make you? That's what Guru Nanak Sahib Ji is really trying to get at. He's talking about ideas of impurity. This Shabad is not the end goal of Sikhi. This Shabad is a first step. What step is it? The step is women are human beings. They're not subhumans. They're not impure. That is a basic thing we need to understand. Let's grow from that. So we've taken Guru Nanak Sahib Ji's first step, where he's saying, stop thinking about certain human beings as ritually impure, as dirty, spiritually dirty. Let's grow from that. Let's leave those stupid ancient beliefs in the past. They have no purpose. They're inaccurate, and they are damaging to a community, to our culture, to ourselves. Internally, they are damaging to think of human beings as being impure. That's what Guru Nanak Sahib is saying in the Shabad. He's not saying, oh, women, you're amazing because you give birth to kings. He's saying, men, you're stupid for thinking women are dirty because, look, even the kings that you respect are born from women. That's what Guru Nanak Sahib is talking about. So we've taken the Shabad and we use it all the time, but does this Shabad really speak to women? And I would challenge Sikh women and I would challenge Sikh men to ask Sikh women, do you value yourself as a human being only because of your relationships with men? Because if not, then we need to stop using the Shabad to talk about gender equality. This Shabad is about purity issues and about Guru Nanak Sahib Ji really poking a hole in the idea of physical purity. What role do women play in the Panth today? Here we see a meeting of the SGPC, and we can see a meeting dominated by mainly men, older men for the most part, but men. Not dominated, completely just men, in fact. And so all over, in fact, even today, I'm a man speaking. The presenter is the person who introduced me was also a man. Most camps, in a lot of cases, are organized and run, and the classes are still dominated by men, but especially in our Gurdwara spaces, they're dominated by men. So men dominate, but men would not be able to take on these roles if women didn't support them. So even today, as I'm speaking here, my wife has the children out of the house so they don't make noise. She's taking care of the kids, which allows me the opportunity to speak. So these men sitting here, you know, they're being fed, they're being clothed, they're being taken care of by their wives and their mothers. So men have been given the freedom to take on roles of leadership within the community, to explore Sikhi, to become scholars of Sikhi, because they are supported domestically by women, by their sisters, by their mothers, by their daughters. This is damaging not only to men, but it's damaging not only to women, but to men as well. It's creating a really skewed vision of what Sikhi is. So we have made women into caretakers of the Panth, and we force them into that role. It's not a role that they have been that they've chosen, but they've been forced. They've been constrained into that role. But when we look at Bani, we have to look at who are real caregiver, who's the real person that is taking care of us. And Guruji tells us, and I want to look at especially the last line of the Shabad, Deen Dayal Kirpal Prabh, Nanak, Saad Sang Meri Jalan Bajai, that God is Vaheguru is compassionate and merciful. Vaheguru is Deen and Dayal and Kirpal. Prabhu is Deen, Dayal and Kirpal. That's what Guru Nanak Sahib Ji is saying. When we talk about taking care of loving, of providing comfort, Gurus ascribe that role to Vaheguru Akal Purkh. It is not a gendered role. It's not something that women are supposed to be doing, taking care of their brothers or taking care of their sons or taking care of their husbands. But instead, it's Vaheguru Akal Purkh that is taking care of all of us. What we've done by constraining Sikh women is that we've really forgotten their central role in Sikhi, and we've forgotten what it means to be a caregiver. We have made taking care or being humble or being loving or being kind as a female trait, whereas being strong and macho have become male traits. That's how modern Sikhi has sort of been set up. And I want to really look at the Amrit Sanchar ceremony. So this is, of course, a modern painting. We have no idea what it really looked like, but you know, it's a decent image for our purposes. And here we see Mata Jito pouring the Patase into the Amrit as Guru Gobind Singh Ji is mixing it with the Khanda, with the Panch Pyare standing in the back. Now, this is a really amazing story for Sikh history. Guru Gobind Singh Ji is preparing the Amrit, he's reading the Bani, he's concentrating completely on the Amrit, infusing his spirit, the Naam, the power of the Khanda into the water so that it has a transformative quality when it is drunk in this very richly symbolic act. And in that moment, of her own volition, it wasn't planned out, Mata Jito stands up inspired by Guru, inspired by her love for Sikhi, inspired by her relationship with Guru Shabad. She comes and she brings a Patase and she puts it into the Amrit. And what do the Patase represent? We all know this, they represent sweetness, love, compassion, those aspects. And even look at the names of the first Panch Pyare. We know that everything that the Gurus do is full of symbolic, rich meaning, and that's by Daya Singh. So the first step in becoming a Khalsa is having compassion, having love. And that really comes from Mata Jito's act of pouring the Patase in. So when Guru Gobind Singh Ji created the Khalsa, he wanted to complete the process of destroying social and cultural norms. And that's why, of course, the Panch Pyare came from different castes and came from different parts of South Asia. And that's why everyone was given the same name, Singh and Kaur. It was this really the final act, the final transformation of the Sikh nation to really complete what Guru Nanak Sahib Ji had started. And that idea of destroying our old ties, our old ways of understanding ourselves and other human beings, and instead thinking of ourselves as part of Akal Roop, that we have a connection to the divine. That's what's important. And so a Sikh is supposed to have the compassionate part of inside of them and the strong physical, courageous part of them, and those are supposed to be integrated within one individual. So those roles that were considered feminine in the past and those roles that were considered masculine in the past, that was destroyed because Khalsa is genderless. And Khalsa instead became something that was both strong and brave and also loving and kind and gentle. That was not a female trait and that was not a male trait, but those were Khalsa traits that every member of the Khalsa was to develop within themselves. I'm not going to talk today about whether the Panch Pyare should be women or men. I would challenge us to think about the fact of, if we are a community that judges people based on their internal connection to Vaheguru, or that we understand people because of their internal connection, then a physical appearance should not matter. And if someone is a Sikh, that should be the only qualification for whether they're in the Panj or not. That should be the real primary focus. But what I really want to challenge ourselves is this, that when we think about Amrit, we end up fighting today, can women be in the Panj Pyare, can women not be in the Panj Pyare, and we bring out different logical arguments. I would say that we need to remember that without a woman, there would not be Panj Pyare. Without Mata Jeet Kaur pouring the Patase into the Bata in 1699, into the Deg in 1699, the Panj Pyare would not exist as we understand them. The Amrit would not be formed. And so forget whether Panj Pyare can be women or not. Let's remember the fact that without a woman, the Panj Pyare would not exist. And I want to take a look at what Guru Gobind Singh Ji's definition of a Khalsa is. Is it sort of like that image we saw at the beginning? It's a very macho person, a very strong person physically, someone who is really demonstrating their physical strength. Is that what being a Khalsa means? And this is from Trit Saveye. Guru Gobind Singh Ji says, Jagat jod Japan nisabasar ek banama nek nayanne, puna prem, pratit saje brat gor mari, mat pool na manne, tirat dan deyat sanjam ek bana, neh ek pachane, puna jot jage kat me tab khalas tahe na khalas jane. Guru Gobind Singh Ji says that that person who has awakened the jot of Akal Roop inside of them, has awakened Vaheguru inside of their heart, inside of their mind, who is connected with the divine internally. That person who decorates themselves with love, what a beautiful way of Guruji explaining it. It's just incredible. That a person that is Sajgya, that she or he has decorated themselves in love, and who doesn't for even an instant, even by mistake, follow another path. A person whose only tirat, whose only dan, whose only daya is to connect with the ik, binane ek pachane, recognize that person who within the perfect light arises as a true Khalsa. Onanu Khalsa jano. That's what Guru Gobind Singh Ji is saying here. So really being a Khalsa is about connecting with the divine internally. That is a main definition, and the only definition that we get from Bani of what it means to be a Khalsa. Someone who connects with the divine. What are the qualities of a Sikh? What does Bhai Gurdas Ji tell us? I want to look at the third last line especially. Mittha bolan, niv chalan, hathon de kar patat pavitta. So Bhai Gurdas Ji is saying that by speaking sweetly, behaving humbly, nit chalan, hathon de kar, and giving with their own hands. Now, if we think about contemporary Sikh women, they are the ones who speak humbly. They are the ones who are, when we talk about what's a good Sikh girl, what's a good Sikh boy, it's someone, and you go on those websites where people are trying to find husbands or wives, those matchmaking websites, and when the parents describe their daughters, they'll say, she's very sweetly, she speaks very sweetly, she's very humble, she's very caring, she's very loving. These are the adjectives, the way that we describe Sikh women today. But in fact, this is the way that all Sikhs need to be described, not just Sikh women. So we have taken something beautiful, the qualities of what a Sikh should be, and we have made them as Sikh men. We have made them into tools of oppression as a way of imposing gender discrimination on women. So this really gives, so women, sorry about that, just had a technical issue there. So we have taken the qualities of what a Sikh should be, we have taken qualities of what a Sikh should be, and we have made them into qualities of, we have imposed them on Sikh women, instead of trying to inculcate or trying to develop these qualities for all people, for all Gursikhs. So all Sikh boys and Sikh women, Sikh girls need to develop these qualities. And these should be qualities that should be encouraged in Sikh men and Sikh women. I want to take a look now at the Panth today and what we have lost as a Panth. This is a really troubling image, and I know it's difficult for a lot of us to see. It's a young Sikh boy whose hair was just cut off, literally, seconds before this image was taken. He's in a barber shop in Punjab. So we know that the state of Punjab is pretty horrific today. We know that there's a lot of problems in Punjab, and not only in Punjab, but in the Sikh community outside of Punjab as well. We know that that's a huge issue. We have serious problems with alcohol abuse, with drug abuse, with domestic violence, with a lot of problems, social problems in the community. And I would say that this is my own personal theory, that I think a lot of this stems from our relationship with Sikh women. That when we discriminate, when we disrespect, when we devalue half of our community, that it is only natural that the community starts to completely fall apart. And how much do we devalue Sikh women? Well, we don't need to go into it too much, because I think a lot of us know this, and that's not the focus of our talk today, but I want to just go over a few key figures right now. And the first one is, of course, we've all heard the issue of gendercide. In a healthy population, there's about 1,005 girls born for every 1,000 boys, and in the latest censuses, Punjab has 850 girls for every 1,000 boys. We're literally killing our future. We're literally murdering millions of women. So across India, 10 million women in 1 decade is what the numbers are saying. So we're talking about more people than died in the more people than died in the Holocaust are dying every decade in India because of their gender. And Sikhs are very proud of. We kind of go on and on about how we believe in equality, how we are the only religion where women are allowed to take on all roles within the community, how the gurus preached gender equality, and we sort of look down on other communities, especially in India. We spend a lot of time sort of looking down on Brahmanism, for example. But I want to take a look at this map and look at the areas of the country that are the reddest. So dark red means that there's a highest rate of gender imbalance, and white or light areas are the most equal. And we can see that Eastern and South India are sort of the most equal generally, and the worst, so dark that it looks almost black, is Punjab, Haryana, Delhi. So the birthplace of the gurus are the parts of the Sikh community, are the parts of India that have the worst gender imbalance now. Recently, with what happened in Delhi with that young woman who was gang raped, and there was another just horrific story that came out yesterday. Many of you may have read about a 5-year-old girl who was raped for 2 days, a 5-year-old girl. And this isn't uncommon. And we need to remember that, as shocking as those incidents were, most violence, most sexual abuse happens not from strangers but within the family. Within families this is occurring. And just as the Catholic Church has had these horrible scandals come out over the last decade, I'm promising you that within the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to start hearing horrible stories about what's been happening in Sikh homes, in Sikh gurdwaras, and Sikh institutions in terms of sexual abuse and physical abuse. And you can look at those numbers there. So when we devalue a people from birth, and that's really what we do. I remember talking to a nurse at a hospital in the Lower Mainland. Now this was quite a few years ago. She was not a Sikh. She was a white woman, and she told me, she said, I can tell when a Sikh family, when a Punjabi family has a boy or a girl right away. And I said, how can you tell? And I said, well, if they have a boy, then in their room they have sweets and all this family coming and visiting, and they're giving out sweets to all the nurses and everybody. And if a girl's born, then the family's usually crying. So right from birth, we are devaluing half of our nation. What does that do to Sikh women? What does that do to our community? How can our community really flower and grow and strengthen ourselves and take on these challenges if from our very inception, from where we start raising our children, we are devaluing half of the community. We need to really challenge ourselves about what roles Sikh women used to play in the community, what roles the Gurus want us to play. Now, the Gurus didn't create a completely equal society because, of course, Sikhi is about slow and progressive revolution. So the Guru Nanak didn't come in and give 6 Kripans and give them Amrit and make them into Khalsa right away. It was a progress. It was a step-by-step process that had to happen over 230 years. And similarly, Sikh women played incredible roles in the early Sikh community. Tremendous roles in the early Sikh community. They were generals, they were leaders, they were social leaders, economic leaders. We have not only not lived, grown from that, we haven't even gone back to that. We've actually fallen from those ideals. So Sikh women today have less roles, have less places of leadership than they did in the early Sikh community. But we need to also challenge ourselves as to what Sikh men have lost. And you know, when I look at young Sikhs, the images they post online, for example, on Facebook, or the images that they're proud of, or the Sikhs that they look up to, we've become a community, and I'm guilty of this myself. You know, I don't have many images in my home, but I have a picture of Baba Jarnail Singh in my home. That the figures that we sort of look up to, what qualities are they instilling in us? So how many of us have pictures of Baba Deep Singh but don't have pictures of Bhai Kanhaiya, or don't have pictures of Bhagat Pooran Singh? And so when I talk about the feminine voice in Sikhi, the feminine voice isn't something just for women. It's also something that's very important for Sikh men. Those qualities of being loving and kind, that was what inspired Bhai Kanhaiya to serve even his enemy. That is what inspired Bhagat Pooran Singh to literally dedicate his entire life to taking care of the most physically and mentally disabled amongst us. It was from that spirit of love and compassion. And when we create these sort of inaccurate, glorified, macho images of Sikh figures, we also devalue them. So when we think of Baba Jarnail Singh, for example, I have a picture of him as only this figure who's this great military political leader, we devalue his persona. So if you read his speeches, if you talk to people who interacted with him, you get a very different picture of what type of individual he was. He was kind, he was loving, he had a great sense of humor. When he met people who were not Sikhs, he instantly charmed them because he treated them with respect and love. When he interacted with people who were Sikhs but who cut their hair, we would imagine that he was scary or mean or harsh, but instead he was kind and loving, and he was inspiring to them, and that's why they wished to rejoin the Sikh Panth. So we have created not only negative images or inaccurate images of Sikh history, we've also done a disservice to figures like Baba Deep Singh or Baba Jarnail Singh, for example, by showing them in a light that's maybe not accurate for who they really were. Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji really challenged us to become an integrated Sikh. The Gurus challenged us. And I want to use quickly the story of Bhai Gurdas and Bhai Bidhi Chand to demonstrate that. So Bhai Gurdas Ji is the greatest Sikh scholar of all time. He, of course, was in charge of compiling and writing the very first copy of Guru Granth Sahib Ji under the supervision of Guru Arjan Sahib Ji. He's the one that taught Guru Arjan Sahib Ji and Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji how to read and write. He was their teacher. He wrote Vara and Savaiye that are given a place of importance in Sikhi, second only to Guru Granth Sahib Ji. We can read his Bani as Kirtan and sing it and integrate it into our daily lifestyle, even though it's not in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And he was, of course, the first caretaker of Akal Takht Sahib as well. So Bhai Gurdas Ji is really the scholarly figure. And on the right we have, of course, Bhai Bidhi Chand. And here he is taking back the horses that were stolen from this Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji from the fort in Lahore to give back. And so Bhai Bidhi Chand was a robber. He was a thief who became a Sikh. And the story of Bhai Bidhi Chand, maybe we can talk about it another day. It's a really awesome story. It's one of the greatest adventure stories. Kids love hearing the story of Bhai Bidhi Chand because it's just such an exciting story. But Bhai Bidhi Chand was an expert warrior. He was one of the early Sikh generals in Guru Har Gobind's army. He was an expert with horses, obviously. And yet Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji challenged both of these Sikhs. He sent by Gurdas Ji to Afghanistan, to Kabul, to the famous horse markets there, to buy horses. And he sent by Bidhi Chand to do prachar. So he sent a warrior out to be a scholar, and he sent a scholar out to do the job of a warrior. And Bhai Gurdas Ji, I'm sure, wasn't familiar with horses that much, and I'm sure Bhai Bidhi Chand wasn't used to preaching Sikhi, but they had to develop those parts of themselves. They had to develop themselves. They had to break out of their comfort zone. As a community today, we need to do that as well. So really, this talk is also aimed not just at Sikh women, but Sikh men, that we need to challenge ourselves. We need to take a look at how our community is set up, how our institutions are set up, the institutions we may be a part of. Are we giving space for women? A lot of times Sikh men say, well, we don't stop women from taking part, but if we are dominating the discourse, if we're dominating the discussion, then there isn't even a space for Sikh women. We need to also develop that capacity in our sisters and allow them to develop themselves by taking a step back many times. That's what's needed. And we need to integrate and try to develop those qualities that we have lost as Sikh men. Those qualities of being loving, of being humble, of being kind, of serving others. Those qualities that we imposed on Sikh women, we need to develop within ourselves as Sikh men. And Sikh women need to also challenge themselves, of course, but they also need the space to be able to challenge themselves, to be honest. I think the onus much more is on the people with power. Just like in any unequal system, you wouldn't say in the 1880s that it was the fault of African Americans for not getting rid of slavery. We would say that it was the responsibility of white slave owners and whites in the North in America to give up their power privileges and allow blacks the space to be able to fully take part in the American political life or social life, for example. So the step first needs to be taken by those in power. We need to challenge ourselves to become fully integrated. Guru Gobind Singh Ji created a Khalsa that was genderless, but we have made now a gendered Khalsa. We have made a male Khalsa. And we've forgotten the female voice within the Khalsa. We need to connect with Guru Granth Sahib Ji, because Guru Granth Sahib Ji has that inspiration for us, and Guru Granth Sahib Ji allows us to be able to really be inspired and take on those roles of being a warrior and being a kind and loving person who serves others. That inspiration comes from Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Bani is genderless, Guru Granth Sahib Ji is genderless, the Khalsa is genderless. Guru Granth Sahib Ji is not a male, Guru Granth Sahib Ji is a scripture. So we need to really be inspired by what institutions Guru Gobind Singh Ji has given us. Yes, all 10 Sikh Gurus were men. And we're not going to get into why that may or may not be, because of course that's out of our ability to understand. But what I can say is that the Guru that exists forevermore since 1708, the Guru that is our Guru today is genderless. The Guru Khalsa Panth is genderless. As a nation moving forward, we really talk about how the community has a lot of problems. I really feel personally that one of the ways that our community can really live up to our full potential is by tackling this issue. This is really one of the primary focuses. We've been wasting, and I really believe wasting a lot of time over the last 20 years talking about issues of Maryada, about how many how long Rera should be, what Bani should be included where, and so on and so forth, while our community is literally socially and politically and economically falling apart. We are distracting ourselves from the issues at hand. Those images of Sikh women who were warriors, of women like Bibi Daler Kaur, who could stand up and say, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, I want to stay here in Anandpur Sahib and I want to defend it. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji didn't say, oh, but you're a woman, Bibi Daler Kaur. I don't think it's appropriate for a girl to, be fighting, and you might die or you might get captured, you might be raped. Oh, that's horrible. We can't have you be in that situation. Guru Amar Das Ji didn't say, oh, I can't send a woman to Kabul to be in charge of the Sikh Sangat. That's ridiculous. That's an area dominated by men. She wouldn't be respected there. No, it'd be better if I sent a man there, maybe someone with experience, maybe an Afghani Sikh who comes from an Islamic background. That might make more sense. No, the Guru is revolutionary. The Guru challenges us. And we have stopped challenging ourselves as a community. So that brings us to the end of this part of the presentation. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. We will now be looking at some questions, and I see a few questions here. that have come up, and I'll try to get through them. So I think, so somebody said, from Govinder Singh, women are rising in all communities. Does it seem that in Sikhi, however, we are trying to get them to dress like men with turbans? What is the historical background of this? So there is historical evidence that Sikh women wore the stars. You know, my daughter wears the star. My wife does as well. And so Sikh women have worn the stars traditionally, and we can find old images where they had keskis probably. And we're not going to get into that issue. And like I said at the beginning, I wasn't trying to say that Sikh women should not wear bana, that should not wear cholas, and should not wear the stars. I said that that should be a choice of Sikh women, and not something that men need to even be discussing. That's something that Sikh women can figure out for themselves. And historically, we have evidence from when the Sikhs took over Delhi that Sikh women were part of the Khalsa army, and that some of them dressed in chole and with the mallas, and some of them dressed in suits and in a, what we would consider a more culturally feminine way. And I think that according to everyone's own preference, just as Sikh men have a preference of how they want to dress. And we need to, and I really want to look at this question and kind of turn it on its head. We never talk about how Sikh men should dress. You know, why can't Sikh men also express themselves with more color, for example? We've really sort of constrained what Sikhi looks like today, unfortunately. Moreover, by focusing on this really macho idea of what a Sikh is, or not focusing on it and saying that Sikh women need to be quote-unquote feminine, and that feminine means not wearing the star, because I guess some people think that wearing the star can't be feminine. But for me, I find that the star on a woman can be incredibly feminine and really beautiful. So I really think it's our perceptions, our cultural biases. So I would disagree with even the logic of that question, and no disrespect to the person who asked it, but I would disagree with the logic of it. I don't think that anybody's trying to impose anything. When Sikh women want to wear the stars, that's a personal choice, and I find it an inspiring choice personally. But it also should be a choice, and Sikh women need to be able to choose how they wish to express themselves as Sikhs. I have another question here. Okay. Okay, so here's a question. Do you see how we are continue the segment? Okay, so you know, a lot of the questions are sort of very similar. Oh, sorry, go on.
Santbirji, I have the whole questions panel here. Is it okay if I just read them for you?
Well, you know, I'm looking at some of the questions here, and I feel that some of them are quite similar, and they're kind of the same thing. I can talk about it very briefly. You know, some of the questions are about in terms of we have a lot of problems in the community today. Are these problems just in Punjab, one person asked, or am I focusing too much on Punjab? And I didn't want to focus too much on Punjab. What I was trying to say is that Punjab is a reflection of us. So those issues that are occurring in Punjab, they're occurring in our communities here. Sexual abuse is a ripe problem in our community today. Sikh boys and Sikh girls are sexually assaulted and abused by family members. That's a huge problem in our community. Domestic violence is a huge problem in our community. It's a problem not in Punjab, it's a problem here in our community. Alcohol abuse, drug abuse, these are all problems, and I really feel that these stem from when we devalue a person from birth, then it almost becomes okay culturally to continue to devalue them. And so when we mourn daughters being born, when we praise sons being born, we are creating a culture and mentality where it becomes almost okay to assault or treat women disrespectfully. So why are women raped at such a high rate in India, for example? I would say that really it can be traced back to the cultural perception of what the worth of a woman is from her birth. Do you see any other questions that we should talk about?
Yes, we've had a fairly good response from Kulvinder Singh, and he says, it is women who do this to other women. The leg shaving, coloring hair, looking at Sikh parades, it is a fashion show. I don't want other males to shoulder this blame. In fact, don't moms teach values to their daughters by role modeling? Let's not dwell on the sex ratio and other practice issues, but how theory and reform, which Sikhi is about.
Well, I never, of course, culture is made up of Sikh women and men, and we can even see within the community today, a lot of violence occurs in families between mothers-in-law, for example, against daughters-in-law. And so women play a role in the culture, just as for example, in the slave society, there were house Negroes who played a role in appeasing the slave master, and also sort of took part in persecuting other blacks who were the field hands. For example, also in the Holocaust, one really horrific example is in the Warsaw Ghetto, that the police force that the Nazis used was a Jewish police force. And it was this Jewish police force that was in charge of picking people who would be sent to the concentration camps. And so that's sort of an extreme example, but what I'm saying is that when a culture is set up in such a way, it is not uncommon, of course, that those who are being discriminated against take part in the discrimination. I want to get away from sort of these cultural issues. I want to look at the Sikhi from the Sikhi perspective. How can we be inspired as a community? When we talk about the feminine voice in Sikhi is not something that should be separate from the male voice, but should be brought together with it. It should be something that we can all take ownership of. And so that Sikh men need to develop this as well. And I think from a male, because as a man, I'm speaking as much from a male perspective, of course. I can't speak from a female perspective. And I would say that as a Sikh man, my challenge is to how can I change how I interact within the community? How can I challenge myself in terms of how I consider the roles that are appropriate for women to hold, the biases that I may have? How can I raise my daughter and help my wife raise my daughter so that she feels that all roles are open to her within the community? And how can I raise my son so that he understands that those values that Guru Gobind Singh instilled on us are not male or female values, but those are Khalsa values?
I'd like to apologize to Harpreet Sangha. I think he can't see the questions panel from the attendees. But Harpreet, if you can turn on your microphone, this one is like a regular one I've seen in a lot of blogs. This is from Manmeet Singh. He says, "Why is our community discouraging emergence of Sikh women preachers? I believe there's been very less, if I'm not wrong, no women ragis in the Golden Temple."
Yeah, so, we can look at that issue, and it's really just it's a disgrace that there's no women allowed to do kirtan at the bar side. This is a really historically a bit of a complex issue. We can't get into it fully right now in the few minutes that we have. But what I will say is this, is that remember that our institutions were not controlled by Sikhs for many generations. People assume that the Maryada that occurs at the Barsad is somehow the Maryada that was being practiced from Guru Arjan's time, which is really just ridiculous, because up until the early 1900s there were murtis, there were images of Shiva around the Prakarma. There was a jot inside of the Barsad. There's many anti-Sikh practices occurring. And so the fact that women are not allowed to do kirtan at the Barsad is the same reason why milk is used to wash down the Barsad. These are old anti-Sikh practices that have managed to be retained there. When the Sikh reformers came in the early 1920s and took over the institutions, they didn't go far enough, unfortunately. But I agree, especially in Punjab, that there are very few Sikh women ragis and granthis and so forth. But even as a child, I would say as a community, even the granthis and ragis that we are producing, are they able to interact with the community? Are they able to explain Sikhi in a relevant fashion? Are they able to really be a voice for Sikhi? Are they steeped in Sikh cultural, philosophical, and scholarly traditions? And I would say that, in most cases, unfortunately, we don't see that. And in the early Sikh community that Guru Nanak Sahib Ji created, Sikh women did fulfill those roles. In Kabul, if you went to the Dharamsala, which was what the Gurdwara was called before Guru Granth Sahib Ji was created, if you went to the Dharamsala in Kabul, you would have heard Gatha being done by a woman. And if you want to become a Sikh, you would have had to take an initiation ceremony from that woman. So that's really important to remember. I agree that we really need to try to develop Sikhs. And this isn't to be, I don't want to seem like I'm just trying to push our organization or anything like that, but something like Civic really is a way that we can try to develop both Sikh men and women to take on these positions and these roles. And so at Civic you have female instructors and male instructors, but you also have a lot of women who are taking part and who are developing themselves to be able to take on these roles in the future, hopefully. So as a community, that is something that we definitely need to work on. Any other questions?
Yes, there have been a few more questions. We are actually running a little bit beyond our allocated time, Sambhir.
Okay.
I have passed on a couple of questions to you. Are you able to see them?
This is more common. Let me see here.
One is from Sukhveer Kaur, a lot of reaction.
I'm not able to see them. If you could read it out to me.
Okay, this is from Sukhveer Kaur. It says a lot of reactions I've received within our community when discussing feminism and Sikhi has been negative. There's a sense that because we have the history and principles relegating women with equal rights, that it's enough to say we've accomplished equality, which you've touched on. The other is that critique and discussion of patriarchy among Sikhs has been reduced to one that is a result of one's karma, kismet, or whatever term one prefers. That is, domestic abuse is a result of the woman's karma. It's reduced to Sikhi to inaction. How do we address this issue?
That's some really, when I first presented this talk, I presented this talk at a camp last year. A lot of the Sikh men that, before I started the talk, were really hesitant to take part and were uncomfortable and said, oh, we don't want to hear about all this feminist stuff. So it's really, I was just shocked to hear that, to be honest, and really saddened as well. And there really is this belief that feminism, for example, is something that is about taking away power from men, which is, of course, essential if we want to create a more equal society. And the use of karma or karm to explain inequality, that's a pretty ridiculous way of explaining one's position in the world. If that was a real Sikh tradition, then Guru Nanak Sahib Ji would never have created langar. Then Guru Nanak Sahib Ji would never have created institutions promoting equality. Guru Har Gobind Sahib Ji never would have gone out and fought for equal rights. Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji never would have given his head in Delhi. So we can't use, that's just a ridiculous argument. If people are using that argument, that's horrifying. Because, Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji could have said to the Kashmiri Pandits when they came to Anandpur Sahib, hey, it's your karma. You're going to get forcibly converted and you're going to lose your tradition and religion, and that's okay because you did bad actions in a past life apparently, and that's what's going to happen to you, and just get out of here. I can't deal with this. If that would be the Sikh response, that really is promoting inaction. Sikhs don't make excuses. Sikhs make change. Sikhs go out and see inequality and try to correct it. So I really think that as Sikh men, we have it really easy in a lot of ways, especially in the diaspora. I'm really shocked in the diaspora, especially by how our families, how our communities are run. And these changes, when we talk about community-wide changes, they start in the home. They really need to. They start in how we have our marriages, how we raise our children, how relations are between a man and a woman in a marriage. And one of the really surprising things to me is that in most marriages today, both men and women work. Women are out of the house most of the day as well, working, or they're at school as well. There's very few families where the wife is at home and only the husband is working. That's really not practical nowadays. And yet, even in those families where both are out of the house, when it comes to making food or taking care of the kids or getting their hair done and all those other tasks that are required of cleaning the house, it's still women. So we've created a situation where women have now got double the amount of work. and men just get to sit around and they get to redevelop themselves. They have an opportunity to do part if they want, or do discussions about Sikhi and all these other ways, and they're developing themselves while Sikh women are kind of forced to be caretakers again. And so we really need to challenge ourselves as Sikh men. Let's stop being lazy. Let's make changes in our family. Let's make changes in how we are with our wives, with our daughters. Let's try to make those changes. And let's not make excuses. To say that Karm is a way of explaining gender violence or domestic violence is really just shameful. That's disgusting. Because Guru Nanak Sahib Ji and the Gurus never ever used Karm as an excuse for the position that a person was facing. Instead, they said, no, these are unequal systems that need to be transformed, and we are going to transform them by creating new societies based on respect for each other, regardless of physical appearance, which is why they made Kartarpur, why they made Khadur and Govindwal and Amritsar and Kiratpur. They made all of these cities to create spaces where people were really able to develop themselves fully and take on all positions that were open to them. Any other questions, Badu?
Well, there's a nice comment from Nirverk or Khalsa, if you want to respond to it. It says, feminism is a way for women to grab some piece of equity in a male-dominated paradigm. We need to change the paradigm, not to find a way to fit women into a skewed paradigm. Your emphasis on caring, sweetness, and I would add aesthetics would go a long way towards shifting the paradigm. It's more on a, I think, on a comment.
I appreciate that. And that's what I wanted to talk about. You know, one of the things that bothers me today is, you know, one of the most inspiring figures in Sikh history, personally, is Mata Bhagor, Mai Bhagor. She really is inspiring. But I find it disheartening that she has become the sort of go-to woman for Sikh roles. At the same time, I'm not saying that all Sikh women need to be caring and loving at all. What I'm trying to say is that Sikh women should be open to be Mata Bhagors if they wish, or they should be open to be Bibi Banis if they wish. That should be personal choice. Just as Sikh men should have the choice to be Baba Jarnail Singhs if they wish to develop that aspect of their of themselves, or they can be Bhagat Purn Singhs. So we need to, as a community, be able to, as men and women, fully explore what it means to be a Sikh and not limit ourselves based on gender especially. And so when we talk about qualities of what a woman or a man is, we need to move away from that and really look at Sikh qualities. And I agree that feminism is important, because feminism is about trying to change an unequal system. And right now the system is very much imbalanced. And really, you would have to be completely blind to the reality of the situation to claim that Sikhi is equal today. And we need to really stop talking about how Sikhi is equal, because I find it disrespectful. Just like we talk about Sikhi doesn't believe in caste system, we need to stop saying that, because all around us we see Sikhs practicing caste system. What we can say instead is that the Gurus advocated a destruction of the caste system. We can say that the Gurus advocated for women to take on all roles that were that are available to men within the community. And we can say that we as a community are aspiring to live up to that ideal. But to say, when we use language like, oh, Sikhs are equal, or Sikhs don't believe in the caste system, or there's no gender discrimination in Sikhi, we're really just deluding ourselves, essentially, is what we're doing. And we're not seeing the reality of the world around us. You know, the caste issue is a whole other issue, but it plays a lot into the way that women are treated, in fact. Both are based on, at their roots, on this idea of impurity. And so Guru Nanak Sahib Ji Shabad is important, because Guru Nanak Sahib Ji is trying to say, as a basic first step, stop thinking of women as not human. They are human beings just like you are, men. Guru Nanak Sahib Ji Shabad is reflected men. We need to take that as a first step and then move on from that. We unfortunately haven't lived up to that. We haven't lived up to that because we still mourn when we have daughters. And so when we mourn that we have daughters, we're giving importance to men over women right from their birth. And that's really a challenge to us. Can we even live up to that basic statement of Guru Nanak Sahib Ji and try to develop a culture, Sikhi culture, where it doesn't matter what gender you are?
Okay, one interesting little question from Harbaljit Singh. He says, can you comment on the Sikh perspective on the burqa niqab? Should we oppose it, or should we defend their right to wear it?
Guru Amar Das, this is an interesting, challenging question. You know, Guru Amar Das Ji did not allow the wives of Akbar, when they came to the Darbar, to come veiled. So we do have the historical precedent, but at the same time, Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji died for the rights of Hindus to practice their religion, even though Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji himself in his Bani criticized Brahmanism. So I would say that though we disagree with it fundamentally from our own perspective, we must always stand up for people's freedom of choice to make their own choices. This is a similar issue with gay rights. Whether the community agrees with homosexual rights or not is not the issue. The issue is if people don't have full rights and they are being marginalized, it is a Sikh responsibility to stand with them. So I would say that the niqab or the hijab or the burqa or any of these face or head or body coverings that some Muslim women wear, as long as it's not something that is being imposed, and it's very difficult to say whether it's being imposed or not, but we must allow people the opportunity to express their traditions as they see fit. Just as we can't tell someone who wears the star, who cuts his hair, say, no, you can't wear the star, you can't wear a bug. That person might wear it because for cultural reasons, and that might be important to them. And we need to defend that person's right to wear a bug. If they go to work and they have a problem with going to the star, we can't say, well, you're not Amritari, so it's not a big deal. Why do you even need to wear the star? So similarly, we need to always stand up for people's own personal choices of how they wish to express their faith or their tradition or their culture. And that's really a fundamental Sikh belief, is freedom of choice. That is what our ninth Guru died for people's freedom of choice. So we must defend it. Here in Canada, World Sikh Organization has been advocating and speaking for, in Quebec especially, the province of Quebec here, for the rights of Muslim women to be able to wear their hijab and niqab without any discrimination. And in the process of doing that, they were discriminated against. The president of WSO, or not the president, sorry, their main legal representative, Balpreet Singh, was denied entry into the Quebec Parliament when he was going to speak for the rights of Muslim women to wear head coverings. Ironically, he was not allowed to enter because he was wearing a turban. So it is a challenge. We have our own challenges as a community, but we can't step back from our traditional role of always standing for the rights of those who are having their rights taken away.
Okay, Santbirji, I think we are going past our allotted time. I would just like to wrap up. Thank you for all your questions and comments, and my apologies if your questions were not addressed due to time constraints. Please be reminded that these webinars are provided for free. There is a cost associated with its technology and administration. If you feel you have benefited from this particular webinar or others in the past, please consider becoming a webinar sponsor. More details can be obtained at info@sikhre.org. And also I would like to say that if some of the attendees have additional questions, you could direct them at info@sikhre.org. I'd like to now hand it back to Santbir Singh if he has any closing comments.
Yes, I just wanted to thank the Sangha. This is my first webinar. It can be a little bit difficult. I'm used to speaking in front of an audience where you can interact with people and take questions. But I think it's a really interesting way for our community to be able to interact with each other when we're spread out around the world. And so I look forward to taking part in more of these webinars in the future. If people wish to continue this discussion, you can find me on Facebook, and we can continue this discussion and continue the dialogue if people have any questions or comments or concerns or criticisms as well. I want to apologize also. My pronunciation of Bani is very inaccurate. My figures on history can sometimes be wrong, and the perspective that I offer is my own personal perspective, and it comes from my own math. Not Gurmat, and I'm trying to develop Gurmat as we all are. So I apologize for all the mistakes that I've made in this presentation, and I ask for the Sangha's forgiveness. And I would also ask that as we move together as a Khalsa Panth, let's try to look internally within ourselves and challenge ourselves as Guru Hargobind Sahib Ji challenged his Sikhs to become fully integrated. Thank you very much. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Santbir Singh Ji. I'm going to end the webinar and you will see a feedback testimonial form pop up on your screens. Please take some of your valuable moments in providing us a feedback on how we can make future webinars better. We are here to serve you to do a good job. And thank you again for joining us. We had a great time. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.